My husband never missed a single parent-teacher conference, a single dentist appointment, a single well-child visit. For 6 years of marriage, I thought that made him a good father. I was wrong about almost everything. His name is Colton. Colton March. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party in Austin when I was 28 and he was 33. He was the kind of man who remembered what you ordered on your first date and showed up with it 3 months later, just because. He was attentive in a way I'd never experienced before, and I mistook that attentiveness for love. It took me 6 years to understand that some people pay very close attention to the things they want to control. We got married 14 months after we met. Small ceremony, his family's ranch outside Dripping Springs. His mother cried. My dad walked me down the aisle on a September afternoon that felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Our daughter Lily was born 18 months later. Then our son Finn, 2 years after that. The rule started with Lily, though I didn't think of it as a rule at first. Lily's 4-month checkup fell on a Tuesday when I had a work deadline. Colton offered to take her. Of course he did, that's who he was. By the time Finn came along, Colton taking the kids to their appointments was just how things were. He scheduled them, he drove them, he filled out the paperwork. I asked once if I should come along, and he said, "You've got enough on your plate, babe. I've got this." And I believed him. Because what reason did I have not to? The first time I felt something was off, Lily was almost 5. She came home from a checkup with a bandage on the inside of her elbow, not on her upper arm where kids usually get their shots. They had to draw blood? I asked Colton. Routine stuff, he said, not looking up from his phone. The pediatrician just wanted some baseline blood work. For a 4-year-old, what kind of baseline? It's fine, Claire. His voice had that particular flatness it got when he considered a conversation finished. Dr. Whitmore said it was totally standard. I let it go. I always let things go back then. 3 weeks later, I found a lab report in the glove box of Colton's truck. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for our insurance card because I had misplaced mine. The report had Lily's name on it, and Finn's, a separate sheet for each of them. I didn't understand most of the medical terminology, but I understood enough to know it wasn't anything I'd ever heard a pediatrician order for a healthy child. HLA typing, tissue compatibility panels, kidney function markers. I put the papers back exactly where I found them. I sat in that truck in our driveway for 11 minutes, I know because I watched the clock on the dash. Then I went inside and I made dinner, and I didn't say a word. That night after Colton fell asleep, I sat on the bathroom floor with my phone and I started searching. HLA typing is used to match organ donors to recipients. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself there were a dozen other explanations. I went to bed at 2 a.m. with a sick feeling in my stomach that didn't go away for months. The thing about living with someone who is good at control is that they're also good at making you doubt yourself. By morning, I had halfway convinced myself I'd misread something, or that there was some pediatric protocol I simply wasn't aware of. By the following week, with 2 kids to get to school and a full-time job in HR, and the ordinary machinery of life grinding forward, the lab report had almost receded into the category of things I'd have to think about later. Almost. I started paying closer attention, not in any dramatic way. I wasn't ready for dramatic. I just started noticing. The way Colton always scheduled the appointments himself, never asked me which day worked. The way he handled all the medical files, kept a locked box in his home office, he said was for important documents. The way he'd occasionally make phone calls he'd take outside, which he'd always done, but which I now watched with different eyes. About 2 months after I found the lab report, Colton's older brother came to visit from Houston. His name is Wade, and he and Colton have always been close in the complicated way of brothers who grew up competing for the same father's approval. Wade came alone. His wife stayed home with their kids. And on the second night of his visit, after Colton had gone to bed early with what he said was a headache, Wade and I sat on the back porch with a bottle of Shiner, and he told me something that rearranged everything I thought I knew. He said it carefully, like someone who'd been carrying the words for a long time and had finally decided to set them down. "Claire," he turned his beer bottle in his hands, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly. Do you know about Colton's son?" I heard the words. I understood them individually. I couldn't make them form a sentence that made sense. "What? Before you? There was a woman. Priya." They were together for almost 2 years. She got pregnant. Colton wanted her to... He didn't want the baby. She kept him. The boy's name is Asher. He's 7. Wade finally looked at me. He's sick, Claire. Has been for a couple years now. Kidney disease. Progressive. He's going to need a transplant. The beer in my hand felt very cold. How long have you known? I asked. About Asher existing, since before you two got married. He had the decency to look ashamed. Colton asked me not to say anything. He said it was in the past. It had nothing to do with his life with you. I should have... He stopped. I should have told you. I'm sorry. And the transplant? He was quiet for a moment. I heard him on the phone a few months ago, talking to someone, I don't know who, about compatibility testing, about timelines. He looked at me. Claire, Lily, and Finn are Asher's half-siblings. They share Colton's DNA. They'd be the closest potential matches available. I sat very still. He hasn't said it outright to me, Wade said, but I know my brother. And I know that when Colton decides he wants something, he builds toward it very quietly for a very long time. I sent Wade to a hotel that night, not because I was angry at him. I was, but that wasn't why. I sent him to a hotel because I needed to be alone in my house, with my children asleep down the hall, to think clearly. I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table until 5 in the morning, and I thought about every appointment, every lab draw, every time Colton had said, "You've got enough on your plate." Then I made a decision. I didn't confront Colton. I know that might seem strange, but I understood on that sleepless night that if I confronted him before I knew everything, he would manage the situation. He would explain, minimize, reframe. He was extraordinarily good at all three. I needed to know more than he thought I knew before I said a single word. I called in sick to work the next day. While Colton was in his home office on a call, I got into his truck and I photographed every document in the glove box. There were 3 lab reports, one I hadn't seen before, more recent, with updated numbers on both kids. I put everything back. Then I went back inside, and I was a perfectly normal wife for the rest of the day. The following week, I called Lily and Finn's pediatric practice myself. I said I had some questions about recent blood work and wanted to speak with the physician. The receptionist was polite, but told me she'd need to pull their files and have someone call me back. The call came 2 days later. Not from a nurse, from Dr. Okonkwo herself, the pediatrician who'd seen my kids for the past 3 years. Mrs. Ewell, Marsh, she said, and there was something measured in her voice that I recognized later as the tone of someone choosing words very carefully. "I'm glad you reached out. Would you be able to come in? There are some things I'd like to discuss in person." I arranged for my mother to pick the kids up from school. I told Colton I had a dentist appointment. I drove to the pediatric clinic alone. Dr. Okonkwo closed her office door and sat across from me and folded her hands on her desk. "The children are healthy," she said first, and I understood why. She needed me to be able to hear the rest. "But I have to be transparent with you. The testing your husband requested over the past 14 months is significantly beyond what we'd order for routine pediatric care. When I flighted and asked him directly, he told me you were both aware of a family health history that warranted monitoring." She looked at me steadily. "I'd like to confirm that's accurate." "It's not," I said. She nodded slowly like she'd suspected as much. "The panels he requested, HLA compatibility typing, renal function profiling, specific genetic markers, these are not standard wellness screenings. They're the kind of tests ordered when someone is assessing a child as a potential organ donor match." She paused. "I want to be very clear that I have not diagnosed your children with anything. I have not recommended any procedures, and I have not facilitated any referrals for anything of the sort. But I think you deserve to know what you've been brought into without your knowledge." I gripped the arms of the chair. "Do you have any documentation?" she asked gently. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photographs. She looked at each one carefully. Then she said, "I think you need a family law attorney, today, if possible." She gave me the name of a colleague, whose wife was a lawyer. She walked me out through a side door so I wouldn't have to sit in the waiting room. I sat in my car in that parking lot for a long time. The sky outside was flat and white, the kind of Texas winter sky that gives you nothing. I thought about Lily at breakfast that morning, eating her waffle in her pajamas, asking me why butterflies don't have teeth. I thought about Finn's gap-toothed smile, the stuffed dog he still slept with, even though he was 6 and would deny it to anyone outside the family. Then I picked up my phone and called the attorney. Her name was Joanna Peck. She had an office near the domain and a directness that I needed badly in that moment. She listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Okay, here's what we're going to do." What followed was 6 weeks that I can only describe as living 2 lives simultaneously. In one life, I was Colton's wife, cooking dinner, watching TV on the couch, attending Finn's soccer game on Saturday mornings. In the other life, I was systematically building a legal record. Joanna advised me not to remove anything from the house, but to document everything. I photographed the locked box one afternoon while Colton was at the gym. I couldn't open it, but through a gap where the lid didn't quite close, I could see the edge of a folder marked with what looked like a medical facility's letterhead. I photographed the phone bill records we received by mail. Colton paid the bills, but the statements still came to the house, and I was a joint account holder. There were repeated calls to a number in Houston. When Joanna had it traced, it came back to a pediatric transplant coordination service. Joanna also tracked down Priya. I hadn't asked her to exactly, but when I told her what Wade had shared, she said finding Priya was important. If this child is real and this sick, we need to understand the full picture of what your husband has been planning. Priya was 38, lived in a suburb north of Houston, worked as a pharmacist. She agreed to speak with Joanna after some initial hesitation. What she shared built the rest as a picture. Colton had reappeared in her life about 3 years ago, not long after Ash's diagnosis. He'd been generous at first, offering financial help with medical bills, expressing what seemed like genuine remorse for not being present. He'd asked to meet Asha. He'd asked questions about Asha's health. He had, Priya said, seemed like a changed man. Then he'd started asking about other options. Transplant lists, compatibility. Whether Priya or her family had been tested, she wasn't a match. Her parents were too old. There were no other biological relatives on her side who were close enough. He told me he was going to figure something out, Priya told Joanna. I didn't ask what he meant. I think I didn't want to know. Asha, for his part, was a real child in a genuinely terrible situation. 7 years old, on dialysis 3 times a week, his name on a transplant waiting list with the kind of timeline that didn't allow for complacency. None of what Colton had done was Asher's fault. Not one single bit of it. That was the hardest part to hold. The fact that somewhere in all of this was a little boy who was sick and who needed help and who had not asked for any of the choices the adults around him were making. Joanna filed for an emergency protective order on a Thursday morning in February. She had documented evidence of unauthorized medical testing conducted on minors without the knowledge or consent of the custodial mother, and correspondence, pulled from the phone records and one email thread I'd found on a shared family computer, indicating coordination with a transplant facility regarding the children as potential donors. She also had a sworn statement from Priya, and a separate statement from Wade, who, to his credit, did not hesitate when asked. Colton was served at his office. He called me 17 times between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. that afternoon. I didn't answer any of them. The kids were at my mother's. I sat in Joanna's conference room and I waited. The next several months were the kind of hard that leaves marks. Colton hired a very expensive attorney who tried 4 different legal strategies, each one designed to characterize what he'd done as parental concern rather than anything more sinister. He argued that he'd been acting in good faith, that the testing was precautionary, that I was building a narrative out of circumstantial evidence. But the calls to the Transplant Coordination Service were not circumstantial. The letter Joanna eventually obtained through discovery from a transplant physician in Houston, indicating that Colton had inquired about the process for living-related donor surgery involving minor children, was not circumstantial. Colton had asked, in writing, whether both children could be evaluated, noting that a single donor might be insufficient given the recipient's deteriorating condition. The judge presiding over our divorce proceeding referred the matter to the district attorney's office. I won't go into all the legal details because I'm not a lawyer and I still don't fully understand them myself. But what I can tell you is this. Colton did not get unsupervised access to Lily and Finn during the proceedings. Eventually, a criminal investigation was opened. There were charges filed. I can say that. What happens fully at the end of that process, I don't know yet. We are still in it. What I do know is that Asher exists and is sick and is not responsible for his father's choices. I know that because Priya and I have spoken, genuinely spoken, not through lawyers, twice now. Both times felt surreal and sad and oddly human. She is not a villain. She is a mother watching her child suffer. We are, in a terrible way, in the same situation, both of us deceived by the same man in different directions. Lily and Finn don't know the details. Lily knows that her dad and I are not living together and that there are some complicated grown-up problems that are not her fault and not her brother's fault. Finn knows his dad isn't coming to soccer for a while. He asked me once if Daddy was sick. I held it together until he fell asleep. I go to therapy now, every Thursday morning. My therapist, whose name I will not share because she didn't agree to be in this story, once told me that the most insidious form of control is the kind that wears the costume of care. That has stayed with me. I believed Colton was a devoted father because he never missed an appointment. I never stopped to ask what he was doing at those appointments, because devotion looked like presence, and presence felt like love, and love felt like trust. And I trusted him. I don't have a lesson that ties this up neatly. I'm not at the end of this yet. Some days I drop the kids at school and sit in the parking lot for 5 minutes before I drive away, just breathing, just reminding myself that they are okay, that we caught it, that the lab reports I found in a glove box while looking for an insurance card were not nothing, even though every instinct I'd been trained into over 6 years of that marriage told me I was probably overreacting. You are not overreacting. That's the only thing I know how to say with any certainty. If something feels wrong, if a door keeps closing in your face in your own home, if the person who says they've got it handled never lets you check, you are not overreacting. Lily asked me last week why butterflies don't have teeth. I told her it's because they don't need them. They find everything they need in a different way. She thought about that for a second, and then went back to her waffle. I'm still thinking about it. People ask me sometimes what the moment was, the exact moment everything changed, and I always think about that glove box, a gap in the lid of a locked box, an insurance card I couldn't find, the most ordinary errand in the world leading me to a lab report I wasn't supposed to see. That's how it usually goes. The truth doesn't announce itself. It waits in the places you forgot to check. I've thought a lot about why Colton believed he could do what he did, arrange secret medical testing on his own children, coordinate with a transplant facility, build an entire parallel plan, and simply never get caught. I think it's because I had been so thoroughly trained to not ask questions. Not loudly, not even internally. Every time I felt something was off, there was a ready explanation and a closed door and a voice that said, "You've got enough on your plate." And I believed it, because believing it was easier than the alternative. That's not weakness. I want to say that clearly, because I spent a long time treating it like it was. The capacity to trust the person you build a life with is not a flaw. It's what makes a life worth building. What Colton did was deliberately exploit that capacity. He found the place in me that wanted to believe in his goodness, and he used it, methodically, for years. The cause of everything that unraveled was not my trust, it was his choice to betray it. And choices have weight. Every single one. The choice to keep Asher a secret before we married. The choice to use our children's bodies as a resource without my knowledge. The choice to file, and lie, and manage. Those choices stacked up over years, and eventually the stack became something a judge and a district attorney could see very clearly. You can control a great deal in a household. You cannot control what a paper trail says about who you are. What I want Lily to understand someday. When she's old enough, when the story has settled into something she can hold without it crushing her, is that she never has to earn the right to information about her own life. She never has to wait for someone to decide she's ready. A door that keeps closing in your face in your own home is not a door you owe anyone the patience to keep knocking on. What I want Finn to understand is that real strength doesn't look like control. It doesn't look like being the one who handles everything while keeping everyone else in the dark. Strength is the harder thing, being someone another person can actually see. Colton was capable of extraordinary planning, extraordinary patience. He aimed all of it at the wrong thing, and it cost him everything. And what I understand now, sitting on the other side of all of it, is that the moment I stopped doubting my own instincts, the moment I sat in that truck and thought, this is not nothing, that was the moment I started getting my life back. Not the court date, not the protective order, that moment in the driveway, alone, when I decided that what I felt in my body was worth listening to. I'm still learning to trust that. Some days are easier than others. But Lily asked me once why butterflies don't have teeth. I told her they find what they need, a different way. I think I'm still finding mine.